Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss some of the things that came up in yesterday's Treasury Select Committee hearing as MPs took evidence about the state of the economy, particularly related to inflation, from Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, as well as a few others from the Bank of England, where the Brexit elephant got a little bit louder as he explained that the UK was doing worse than basically every other advanced economy due to domestic issues. Wonder what domestic issues he was thinking of. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, UK Economic Policy Day, really. I am aiming to discuss the budget statement in the second video today, but that is very dependent upon timings. But yesterday, the Treasury Select Committee took evidence from the Bank of England on inflation. The new chair of the committee, a Tory MP, noted the very high inflation of just over 11%, with a target of 2%, and asked the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey what went wrong with their forecasting model. Bailey said that he would begin with COVID and then move forward. So he said that what we've experienced since COVID hit is a series of supply shocks. So before I get on to exactly what he said about those, I don't have to avoid treading on political toes. Let's be clear about what these supply shocks were. So first of all, obviously not all of them are Brexit related. COVID itself began labour. It even began labour problems due to restrictions of movement. So that inevitably meant that you had difficulty getting labour from other countries. But these movement restrictions don't really exist anymore. But labour shortages are still the number one problem for British-based businesses. Semiconductor shortages, we know, have been another COVID-related problem, although we're probably going to get a glut of those now. But, you know, it was a COVID-related problem. In fact, Bailey actually pointed out that the global supply chain issues related particularly to China was a big hit. So definitely a global issue, although he did say that that's sort of coming to an end now. Russia's war, I mean, that's the biggest supply shock. That's actually bigger than Brexit in itself. You know, that is creating supply shocks, in particular the supply of gas, oil and food. And energy and food are, of course, essential. So that's huge. You know, that being said, the chair of the committee herself did open the statement by saying that they had been warning about inflationary issues before Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And that's important to remember. Last November, I think it was, or October, November time, Boris Johnson was actually asked by journalists about inflation, about the forecast for inflation, and he was denying it would be a problem. Denied it would be a problem. It was getting to be a problem before Russia invaded. You know, the way Tories now go on is, oh, this is entirely down to the Russian war. Yeah, we couldn't predict that. It's like, no, we were having higher inflation than other economies before that happened. Still, the war has added to inflation and, in fact, is the biggest factor in our inflation, which is why the inflation across the world is high. But we've also had Brexit-related supply shocks. The continuing labour shortage is entirely down to Brexit. You can argue long COVID as well, but that is also the same government that decided our policies on it. Post-Brexit immigration policy, a big factor in that. Although we have very few import controls in place since leaving the single market and customs union, there are still inward trade barriers. There are still problems getting supplies into the country. The much higher outbound trade barriers also means, because the same lorries that are stuck in a queue trying to get out of the country are the same ones who will bring the imports back in. So imports are indirectly hit by the EU's import controls on our exports. And this is the thing. Whenever we try to point at the economic harm caused by Brexit, you've got people going, oh, the rest of the world's suffering. Oh, there's high inflation here. There's low growth there. And it's like, well, yeah, the rest of the world is suffering because there are global issues and there are major global issues. But they're not suffering like us. Our problems are worse. For example, as has been reported a bit recently, we are the only G7 economy not to have grown our economy back to 2019 levels. The only one. We're lagging behind all the others. So there has to be an issue that applies to the UK, but not to the United States or to France or to Germany, say. So back to Bailey. He said that particularly labour shortages had reduced the capacity of the UK economy. He has before cited this as a particular block on economic growth. After he'd explained about the global issues related to COVID and Russia's war, he talked about the domestic problem of the UK labour force having actually just shrunk in size. He then referenced the fact that the UK is the only OECD country showing this pattern of labour force shock. So not even just the G7 here, the OECD. This is basically every country, well, in North and South America and Europe, certainly with a couple of Asian ones. It's basically every country that has a properly run economy. It doesn't include all the Asian economies, but China would be in the G7, so we can compare with that as well when we look at G7 data. And they haven't suffered this problem either. Basically, we're the only country to have seen this huge shrinking of the number of workers. The government keep talking about low unemployment, which is fiddled anyway. But what they don't mention is the number of people in work is well down on 2019. Not because the difference is people technically out of work. You know, you would only... If you're going to say, like, there's fewer people in work, you might think, oh, does that mean unemployment's higher? No, because it's not. Unemployment plus employed people is not the same number. What we've got is fewer people available for work, either working or looking for work. Bailey used figures to show the impact as he saw it. The UK economy is 0.7% smaller than in 2019. But for the Eurozone, it's 2.1% bigger. And the USA is 4.2% bigger. And that's also important because what's going to happen next year is, you know, at some point when we grow our economy, at some point, doesn't sound like it's going to be for 2 years at this rate, they're going to say, oh, look, we've got this massive percentage growth. It's going to be a percentage growth. But that's because we'll have shrunk our economy so low that any sort of upturn at all is going to look good. But the Euro, right now, our economy is smaller than 2019. The Eurozone's is bigger, USA's is bigger. Now, COVID hit all of these economies very hard. Russia's war has hit, well, it's also hit every economy really hard, but that has undoubtedly hit the Eurozone extremely hard. I would say that it's inevitably hit the UK incredibly hard as well. But actually, government ministers keep insisting that we were relatively shielded from the impacts because we didn't buy that much gas or oil from Russia and we have lots of renewable energy. So journalists really should have been asking, so why, if EU countries were particularly hit, if they were more reliant on Russian fuel, why we were paying higher premiums on energy than those EU countries? But they didn't ask that. And in any case, it's rubbish because it doesn't matter where we get our fuel from. We pay the market value for it. And that market value is determined by global supply and demand. But still, nobody can doubt that COVID and Russia's war hit Europe at least as hard as the UK. And really harder. Yet the UK is suffering way more. So the fact that the vast majority of our inflation figure can be put down to the war and then some to COVID still leaves us with a Brexit factor. Without Brexit, our inflation would not be as high as it is now. It would still be high, but not as high. Without Brexit, our economy would have recovered. Because every other economy has, why wouldn't ours have? Without Brexit, we wouldn't be suffering these labour force shocks. Again, why would we? Because nobody else is. You know, because although the governor could not explicitly name Brexit, you know, he could have just to every question said Brexit, Brexit. He didn't. And he's not going to because he has to be careful of treading on political toes. So although he couldn't explicitly name that as the factor that makes the others worse, he was clear that the difference was domestic, something here. No external pressure on the UK that doesn't apply elsewhere. Internal. Yes, some of our issues are COVID, but the governor said that these issues are subsiding. In reality, I think if he's saying that, I think he's ignoring the huge toll it's having on people exiting the workforce with long-term illness, greater pressure on the NHS and all the rest of it. I actually don't think COVID as an issue is subsiding at all, but he said it was. The war, I mean, that's the biggest factor. No one doubts that. It's huge. Much bigger factor than Brexit. But that's going to be over next year. There'll be a period of recovery, obviously. Ukraine will take time to have to build up its agriculture again. But there is a limit on how long that can be a major factor. But Brexit's permanent. Until we reverse it, it's permanent. In fact, we haven't even had the full Brexit yet. The EU still haven't implemented their tighter border controls, you know, the biometric scans yet. That's not in place yet. We still haven't sorted out our customs and standards controls. Brexit stands to get worse yet. unless we want to reverse some of it. Certainly reverse some of the harsher aspects of it. And this is why I say, people panicking about whether we go back to the single market or not, largely wasting their energy. Of course we're going back. Public opinion's already turning sharply against Brexit. Some of the media outlets that were covering for Brexit are now not doing, or at least not doing so strongly. There'll come a time in the foreseeable future, in the next few years, when Brexiteers can no longer blame these major global factors, when it looks like the rest of the world is moving on again, and we're not so much. We're lagging behind. There'll come a time when people notice that we're lagging behind other countries. Even a Conservative government is not going to get away with this. And they've got the media on their side. And consider that. The Brexit Conservative government that implemented all this, and their media that pushed for it, even they cannot stop public opinion turning against Brexit. But it's likely in a couple of years' time we'll have a Labour government. They've got zero chance of getting away with economic stagnation, not a chance in hell. The Tory media will be all over them like a rash if they can't get the economy moving. Single market entry, no-brainer. Labour can win the next election based on promises to do better than the Tories, yes, but they cannot win the one after without results, because they will be the party of government then. To win the one after, they need to show results and the credible promise of better results to come. My concern is that we join the single market and then coast. My worry is about rejoining the EU entire, not just the single market. The single market, relatively easy, because there's no way for us to sustain our economic expectations outside it. Not a way. No chance. The Bank of England could not have been clearer. If we have a smaller workforce, we'll have a smaller economy. There are other issues as well. But that is the major limiting factor, they say. Inflation will come down next year. Obviously, prices will remain high. Our economy will continue to shrink. Until that labour shortage is dealt with, we will never see serious economic growth. After it shrunk for a bit, it may grow a little, but it won't grow back to where it was until we deal with that. How can it? Until we've got the workforce that we had, how can it? We may see some decent growth percentages, because like I say, growing a smaller economy looks good as a percentage. But in terms of GDP added, it will remain poor until we have the workers to fill the jobs that are the real wealth creators. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.